The sunset painted the sky in orange hues as Henry, Emily, and Caleb hit the road towards the countryside of Virginia. The heavy traffic as they left Richmond had already delayed them, and Henry didn't want to waste any more time. His methodical and pragmatic nature made him impatient with unexpected events, especially when he had important commitments to fulfill. Emily, seated next to her husband, was absently scrolling through her phone, while Caleb, in the back seat, alternated between observing the landscape and checking messages on his phone. The winding road cut through hills covered in dense vegetation, and few cars crossed their path at that time of day. The silence inside the car was broken only by the soft sound of the radio playing an old song. "Dad, how much longer?" asked Caleb, adjusting himself in the back seat. At 16, he had inherited his father's impatience, although he was more adventurous and less cautious. "About 2 hours if there are no more delays," Henry replied, his eyes fixed on the road. "We should have been halfway there if it wasn't for that traffic jam leaving the city." Emily smiled, accustomed to her husband's obsessive punctuality. "Honey, relax. Aunt Rose won't mind if we arrive a little later. She's just happy we accepted the invitation to spend the weekend at the farm." It was then, while taking a turn, that Henry hit the brakes abruptly. In the middle of the asphalt, standing as if waiting for something, a large, light-colored Pitbull, dirty and visibly frightened, stared at the vehicle. Henry's heart raced. He had never trusted large dogs, and this one looked strong enough to knock a person down without effort. "My God, where did that dog come from?" exclaimed Emily, leaning forward in her seat. "He looks lost." Caleb already had his face pressed against the window. "Dad, we have to help. Look, he seems to be hurt." Henry honked, trying to scare the animal away, but the dog remained motionless. Its amber eyes fixed on the car had a disturbing intensity, as if trying to communicate something urgent. Hesitation took over the vehicle. "Henry, we can't leave." "Him here," Emily insisted, touching her husband's arm. "What if he ends up causing an accident?" Reluctantly, Henry turned on the hazard lights and pulled the car onto the shoulder. The Pitbull, seeing the movement, ran a few meters to the side of the road and stopped again, turning its head back as if asking them to follow. "This isn't normal," Henry muttered, turning off the engine. "Lost dogs usually run away or approach, begging for food. This one is clearly trying to lead us somewhere." "All the more reason to check it out," argued Caleb, his hand already on the door handle. "It could be something important." Emily nodded, though her expression revealed a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Let's just take a quick look. If it's something dangerous, we'll come back to the car." As they got out, they realized that the Pitbull, although frightened, showed no signs of aggression. Its body was tense, but it didn't growl or back away. Instead, it began to walk towards a dirt road that branched off into an area of dense vegetation. The path was narrow, surrounded by twisted trees and tall bushes that blocked the view of the horizon. The smell of damp earth and dry leaves hung in the air, mixing with the sweet aroma of wildflowers that dotted the vegetation. The trail, barely visible at first, became more marked as they advanced. "This doesn't seem like a good idea," Henry grumbled, following a few steps behind Emily and Caleb. "We're already late, and now we're following an unknown dog to God knows where." "Dad, sometimes the most important things in life happen when we least expect them," Caleb philosophized, without taking his eyes off the Pitbull guiding them. "Remember, when you met Mom, it was because your car broke down on the way to that job interview." Emily laughed softly. "He's right, honey. That day you were also complaining about your ruined plans." Henry didn't respond, but his expression softened a bit. The memory of that day still made him smile, even after so many years. However, his intuition continued to warn him that something about this situation wasn't right. The dog maintained a steady pace, occasionally stopping to make sure they were still following. Its movements were decisive, as if it knew exactly where it was going. As they delved deeper into the vegetation, the sound of cars on the road diminished, replaced by birdsong and the rustling of leaves in the wind. It was then that Henry noticed something strange. On the ground, partially camouflaged by loose soil, there were drag marks cutting across the path. His body instantly tensed. Beside the marks, human and canine footprints mixed in a confusing pattern. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. The air seemed to grow thicker with each step they took. Henry held Emily's arm, making her stop. "Something's wrong here," he whispered, pointing to the marks on the ground. "Look at these footprints. They're recent." Caleb crouched down to examine the marks more closely. "They're different sizes," he observed, running his fingers through the dirt. "Some seem to be from children." A shiver ran down Emily's spine. The pit bull, a few meters ahead, emitted a low, anxious whine as if urging them on. The trail made a gentle curve, and that's when they saw it. Partially hidden by vegetation, an abandoned warehouse stood against the rapidly darkening sky. The metal structure was visibly deteriorated, with rust stains covering much of its walls. A steel gate, slightly ajar, creaked softly in the evening breeze. From inside the warehouse emanated a disturbing odor, a mixture of rust, dampness, and something else that made Henry's stomach contract. "We shouldn't be here," Emily murmured, squeezing her husband's hand. "This doesn't seem right." The pitbull, however, was already near the gate, its ears erect and attentive to something that only it seemed to perceive. A low growl began to vibrate in its chest, but it wasn't directed at them. Its eyes were fixed on the darkness beyond the gate. "Is anyone there?" Caleb called out, his voice echoing disturbingly in the silence of the woods. "Shh!" Henry quickly reprimanded him. "We don't know what might be happening here." A muffled noise came from inside the warehouse, as if something heavy had moved. The pitbull reacted immediately, its growl intensifying. Henry pulled his cell phone from his pocket and turned on the flashlight, illuminating the grimy concrete floor of the warehouse. The footprints continued inside, some still damp, as if they had been made recently. Among overturned boxes and old furniture covered in dust, something caught Emily's attention. A dog identification collar thrown in a corner. "Look at this," she said, cautiously approaching to pick up the object. The metal of the tag was still shiny, contrasting with the dirt of the environment. "There's a name engraved here, Thor." "But that's not his name," said Caleb, looking at the pit bull that had led them there. The animal remained alert, its muscles tense under its light coat. A weak, hoarse moan echoed from the back of the warehouse, making everyone freeze. The sound came from a darker area, where several large boxes were stacked haphazardly. The pit bull began to move in that direction, its entire body conveying urgency. Henry directed the cell phone light to that area, revealing something that made his blood run cold. Scattered on the floor were partially burned documents and, among them, several used syringes. The metallic smell they had sensed became stronger, now mixed with a chemical odor that made their eyes burn. "We need to get out of here," Henry whispered, pulling Emily by the arm. "This isn't just an abandoned warehouse. Something very wrong is happening here." But before they could move, a violent thud made them jump. The gate had closed forcefully, plunging the environment into an even deeper darkness. The only light now came from Henry's cell phone, creating distorted shadows on the rusty walls. It was then that Emily noticed, attached to the upper walls of the warehouse, partially covered in dust, were security cameras. The small red lights blinking indicated they were active. Someone was watching their every move. "Henry," she murmured, her voice trembling slightly as she pointed to the cameras. The sound of heavy footsteps outside made the pit bull position itself between them and the gate, its growl now more threatening than ever. It was no longer the frightened animal they had found on the road. Now it seemed like a determined guardian protecting them. "There's a back door," Caleb whispered, his eyes adapting to the darkness. "Behind those boxes." Henry nodded silently, carefully guiding his family between the obstacles. The weak moan they had heard before sounded again, closer now. The pit bull looked alternately at them and at the source of the sound, as if torn between protecting them and helping whoever was in need of assistance. The footsteps outside were approaching the gate. Muffled voices began to be heard, and the sound of keys jingling made everyone's heart race. What had begun as an unexpected detour on their trip was about to transform into something much more serious, something that would change their lives forever. Time seemed to freeze inside the warehouse as the footsteps approached the gate. Henry, Emily, and Caleb moved silently towards the back of the place, guided by the weak light of the cell phone. The Pitbull maintained its protective position, eyes fixed on the entrance, while a new moan, clearer now, echoed from the dark area. "We need to find out what's going on here," Caleb whispered, his heart pounding against his chest. "Someone needs help." Emily squeezed her son's arm, her expression torn between fear and determination. "It's too dangerous, son. We don't know how many people are out there." The sound of male voices became clearer, and isolated words began to be distinguished. Sure, he saw a car. Cameras showed can't have escaped. Henry signaled for everyone to remain absolutely silent. His gaze scanned the environment, looking for an escape route. That's when he noticed something he hadn't seen before. Behind a pile of dusty boxes, there was a staircase leading to a mezzanine. The Pitbull, sensing their discovery, moved silently towards the stairs, as if confirming that was the way to E. Kawasi, its paws made no sound against the concrete floor. With extreme care, the family began to climb the metal steps. Each step was calculated to avoid any creak that could betray their presence. From above, the view of the warehouse revealed disturbing new details. The mezzanine was a kind of abandoned administrative area. Old desks and rusty filing cabinets accumulated in the shadows, but something caught Emily's attention. On one of the desks, there was modern monitoring equipment, contrasting drastically with the deteriorated environment. "Look at this," she murmured, approaching cautiously. On the monitor screens, different angles of the warehouse and the external area were displayed. On one of them, they could see 3 men near the main gate, 2 of them armed with what appeared to be tranquilizer guns. The third man, wearing a white lab coat, was gesticulating agitatedly. "We can't risk them finding out. The entire project would be compromised. Find them." Caleb, who had approached a nearby shelf, picked up a partially burned file. The pages that could still be read contained tables with codes and dates, as well as photographs of various dogs. Some images showed the animals in cages, connected to medical equipment. "My God," he whispered, flipping through the pages with trembling hands. "This looks like some kind of experiment. Look at the dates. This has been happening for months." The Pitbull, which was keeping guard near the stairs, emitted a low, urgent whine. Its eyes fixed on a specific point in the warehouse, where the sound of moans had intensified. Henry directed the cell phone light to that area, and what they saw made their hearts stop for an instant. In a corner partially hidden by dark tarps, several cages were lined up against the wall. Inside them, shapes moved in the shadows. "They're more dogs," Emily said, her voice choked. "That's why he brought us here. They're doing some kind of test on these animals." The sound of footsteps now came from different directions. The men had separated and were systematically searching the warehouse. Time was running out. "We need to do something," Caleb insisted, looking at his parents with determination. "We can't just leave and let this happen." Henry ran his hand through his hair, his mind working quickly. In normal situations, he would be the first to suggest they leave and alert the authorities. But something in the images of those files, in the urgency of the Pitbull, and in the anguished sounds coming from the cages prevented him from simply fleeing. The dog that had led them there seemed to perfectly understand the gravity of the situation. Its eyes alternated between the family and the cages, as if begging for help. That's when Emily noticed something on the monitors that made her blood run cold. One of the men had discovered the stairs and was heading towards the mezzanine. "Quick," Henry whispered, pulling the family behind a large file cabinet. "We need a plan, and we need it now." The Pitbull positioned itself next to them, its body tense but controlled. On the monitor screen, they could see the man in the lab coat talking on a cell phone, his expression increasingly agitated. "Doctor, we have a situation here." "No, sir, we haven't found them yet, but—" "Yes, sir, I understand the gravity." Trapped in the mezzanine with one man climbing the stairs and 2 others searching the lower floor, the Smith family found themselves faced with an impossible choice: try to escape and alert the authorities, running the risk that all evidence would disappear, or act immediately to prevent something even worse from happening in this dark place. The silence in the mezzanine was broken only by the muffled sound of footsteps on the metal staircase. Henry looked around, his mind working frantically in search of a solution. That's when he noticed something he hadn't seen before. An old service door, partially hidden behind dusty file cabinets. "Over there," he whispered, indicating the discovery. To Emily and Caleb, the Pitbull was already moving in that direction, as if it had read his thoughts. With calculated movements, they moved through the shadow of the abandoned furniture. The man climbing was almost reaching the top of the stairs. His heavy steps echoed on the metal, creating an anguishing countdown. As they reached the door, Henry turned the doorknob with extreme care, praying that the hinges wouldn't creak. To his relief, the door opened silently, revealing a narrow corridor that seemed to serve as a maintenance route. "It must lead outside," Emily murmured, her voice barely audible. "We can call for help." But before they could advance, the Pitbull planted itself in front of them, blocking the path. Its amber eyes conveyed a clear message. It wasn't time to flee. "He's right," said Caleb, surprising his parents. "If we leave now, they'll disappear with everything, with the documents, with the dogs, with all the evidence." The sound of something heavy being dragged on the lower floor caught their attention. Through cracks in the mezzanine floor, they could see the other two men moving the covered cages towards a side door of the warehouse. "They're trying to remove the evidence," Henry whispered, his expression changing. Years of caution and practicality were fighting against a growing sense of indignation. That's when a shrill sound cut through the air, an alarm coming from one of the monitoring devices. On the main screen, a message flashed in red. "Emergency protocol activated. Immediate evacuation." "Damn it!" they heard a man on the lower floor shout. "Someone must have triggered the silent alert. The police will be automatically notified." Chaos ensued in the warehouse. The man who was almost reaching the mezzanine hurriedly descended, his heavy footsteps on the metal staircase. The voices were now loud, urgent. "We have 15 minutes before the first patrol car arrives," someone shouted. "Burn everything, take the priority specimens." Emily squeezed Henry's arm. "It's our chance. They're disorganized." The Pitbull was already on the move, silently, descending a side emergency staircase they hadn't noticed before. Its movements were precise, as if it knew every inch of this place. "Son, stay here," Henry began, but Caleb interrupted him. "No way, Dad, we're in this together. Besides," he smiled nervously, "I'm the only one who can hack systems with that program Uncle Paul taught me." There was no time for arguments. The sound of papers being torn and equipment being hastily shut down echoed through the warehouse. Amid the confusion, no one noticed four shadows moving strategically across the mezzanine. Caleb approached the monitoring equipment, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "If I can access the main system. Yes, the cage locks are electronic. I can open them remotely." "Wait," Emily whispered, observing the monitors. "We need to make sure they're not near the cages when this happens." The Pitbull, which was keeping guard on the emergency staircase, emitted a low whine. Through the cameras, they could see one of the men approaching a van parked at the back of the warehouse. "It's now or never," said Henry, his voice firm, years of caution giving way to fierce determination. "Caleb, release the locks. Emily, you know veterinary first aid. We need to check on these animals." "And you, Dad?" Caleb asked, his fingers pausing over the keyboard. A different smile appeared on Henry's face, the kind of smile that only appears when someone decides that some rules need to be broken for the greater good. "I'm going to make sure no evidence leaves this place," he replied, taking out his cell phone. "I have some contacts in the police department who can get here well before the regular patrol cars." Downstairs, the men continued their frantic attempt to erase traces. The sound of a paper shredder mingled with the now more frequent barks coming from the cages. The Pitbull looked at each of them, as if assessing whether they were really prepared for what was about to happen. Satisfied with what it saw, it turned back to the stairs, ready to lead once again. On the computer screen, a simple command flashed, awaiting confirmation. "Release all security locks." Caleb looked at his parents, receiving an affirmative nod from both. His fingers pressed the enter key, and the sound of dozens of locks opening echoed through the warehouse, marking the beginning of a sequence of events that would forever change not only their lives, but those of many others. The sound of the locks opening was followed by a moment of absolute silence, the calm before the storm. Then chaos erupted in the warehouse. Barks of different tones filled the environment while the men shouted confused orders at each other. "The cages! Who released the cages?" yelled the man in the lab coat, his voice choked with panic. "Tranquilize the specimens. We can't lose control of the situation." From the mezzanine, the family observed the scene unfolding through the monitors. The Pitbull was already descending the emergency staircase, moving like a shadow towards the open cages. Henry finished his hurried call and put the cell phone back in his pocket. "My! Contacts will be here in 10 minutes, he whispered. "We need to keep these men busy until then." Emily, who was watching the monitors attentively, noticed something peculiar. "Look at the dogs. They're not running away. They're organizing as if they knew exactly what to do," Caleb completed, amazed. On the monitors, they could see that the released dogs, about a dozen of them, were moving in precise formation, surrounding the men trying to reach the van. The Pitbull that had led them there was clearly leading the group. Its movements were calculated, precise as if it were executing a long-planned strategy. The other dogs, of different breeds and sizes, followed its indications with surprising synchrony. "This isn't normal behavior," Emily murmured, her years of experience as a veterinarian evident in her voice. "Their coordination, the strategy, it's almost as if they were more intelligent," Henry completed, his mind struggling to process what he saw. "Is that what they were doing here? Some kind of experiment to increase animal intelligence?" Caleb, still at the computers, had managed to access more files. "There's something here about a synthesis project. They seem to be progress reports. Wait, look at this." On the screen, a document detailed the project's objectives. Phase 3. Increase in cognitive capacity through selective neural stimulation. Preliminary results indicate development of complex reasoning skills and advanced social coordination. "They weren't just doing tests," Emily said, her voice trembling with indignation. "They were trying to create a new form of intelligence." On the lower floor, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. The men had taken refuge inside the van, surrounded by dogs that maintained an impenetrable formation. The lead Pitbull was positioned directly in front of the vehicle, its eyes fixed on the occupants. "We need the evidence," Henry reminded. "Caleb, can you back up these files?" "I'm on it," the teenager replied, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm sending everything to our family cloud. But there's something else here, something about a Subject 0. Emily leaned over the monitor, her eyes quickly scanning the document. Subject 0 was the first successful experiment, a Pitbull that demonstrated cognitive abilities far beyond expectations. Her voice faltered as understanding hit her. "It's him, the dog that brought us here." As if confirming her words, the Pitbull looked directly at the camera, observing them, its amber eyes shining with undeniable intelligence. "He wasn't just asking for help," Caleb said, amazed. "He planned all of this. He chose us, guided us here, waited for the right moment." The sound of sirens in the distance made everyone freeze for an instant. The men in the van seemed to panic, trying to start the vehicle. But the dogs maintained their position, unwavering. "We need to go down," Henry decided. "We have to ensure they don't destroy any more evidence before the police arrive." Emily nodded, but her expression was worried. "What about the dogs? What will happen to them when the authorities arrive?" That's when they noticed something on the monitors that made their hearts race. A new group of people was approaching the warehouse. But they weren't police officers. They wore lab coats similar to the man now trapped in the van. "Reinforcements," Henry muttered. "They must have triggered some emergency protocol." The lead Pitbull, Subject 0, seemed to perceive the new threat at the same time. With a commanding bark, it quickly reorganized the formation of the other dogs. Half of them kept guard on the van, while the others positioned themselves strategically around the warehouse. "It's now or never," said Henry, moving towards the stairs. "Caleb, continue with the backups. Emily, we need to check if there are other animals hidden. We can't leave any of them behind." The sound of sirens was closer now, mixing with the noise of engines and exalted voices from outside. The Smith family had only a few minutes to act before the situation completely spiraled out of control. In the midst of the chaos, Subject 0 looked at them again, And in that gaze was more than intelligence. There was trust. He had chosen them not only to help with the rescue, but to be witnesses to something that would forever change the understanding of the limits of consciousness and the connection between humans and animals. The tension in the air was palpable as Henry and Emily carefully descended the emergency staircase. Caleb remained on the mezzanine, his eyes alternating between the monitors and the laptop, where he continued downloading crucial project files. "Transfer at 70%, he muttered, hoping the precarious connection of the place would hold for a few more minutes. On the screens, he could see the group of scientists approaching from different directions, clearly trying to surround the warehouse. On the ground floor, Henry and Emily moved silently through the shadows, approaching the cage area. Subject Zero, as they now knew he was called, coordinated his canine team with impressive precision. Some dogs kept guard on the van while others strategically patrolled the perimeter. "Look at this," Emily whispered, crouching near one of the empty cages. On the floor, there were partially burned papers and vials with coded labels. They were trying to destroy all physical evidence. Henry picked up one of the vials, examining the bluish liquid inside. "We need to record all of this. Take pictures with your cell phone, but keep the flash off." Outside, voices were approaching. "Dr. Peterson wants all specimens recovered," someone shouted. "Use tranquilizers if necessary, but don't damage the subjects." Subject Zero silently approached Henry and Emily, his eyes communicating clear urgency. With his muzzle, he gently pushed a fallen tarp, revealing an access door that led to a basement. "There's something else down there," Emily immediately understood. On the mezzanine, Caleb watched the external movement with growing concern. The scientists had divided into 3 groups, each carrying equipment that appeared to be animal containment devices. "Dad," he called softly through the improvised communicator they had created with their cell phones. "They have some kind of sonic equipment. They look like behavioral control devices." Henry and Emily were already descending the basement stairs, guided by Subject Zero. The underground environment was significantly colder and equipped with modern technology that contrasted with the abandoned aspect of the upper warehouse. "My God," Emily gasped upon seeing what was there. Aligned on the walls, several screens displayed brain data and behavior patterns. In an isolated area, there was a kind of laboratory with state-of-the-art equipment. "It wasn't just an experiment," Henry murmured, frantically photographing every detail. "It was an entire operation of organic artificial intelligence development." Subject Zero guided them to a central console, where a light was blinking insistently. On the main screen, a file flashed, "Omega Protocol, pending authorization." "Dad." Caleb's voice sounded urgent through the communicator. "They're coming in." "Hans, something's happening with the equipment up here. It looks like some kind of self-destruct sequence." Indeed, a high-pitched sound began to echo through the complex, and red emergency lights lit up on the walls. Subject Zero barked once, drawing their attention to the console. "He wants us to do something," Emily understood, observing the animal now placing its paw on the numeric keypad. Upstairs, chaos intensified. The scientists had managed to enter, but the dogs maintained their coordinated formation, protecting all strategic exits. "The police are almost here," Caleb informed. 30 seconds. Subject Zero barked again, this time with more urgency, his eyes fixed on the flashing screen. Henry looked at Emily, a silent decision passing between them. "Whatever this Omega Protocol is," he said, "he trusts us to activate it." Emily nodded, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "But what if it's something dangerous?" The Pitbull gently touched her hand with his muzzle, his eyes conveying reassuring certainty. At that moment, Emily understood. It wasn't just intelligence they had awakened in these animals. It was a completely new form of consciousness. The sound of footsteps on the basement stairs echoed threateningly. The police sirens were now audible, mixing with the barks and shouts from upstairs. It was now or never. With a quick movement, Emily typed the authorization command. The screen flashed once, and then a message appeared. "Omega Protocol activated." Initiating neural data transfer. All the laboratory screens lit up simultaneously, displaying complex brain patterns that multiplied at an impressive speed. Subject Zero sat calmly, his eyes fixed on the screens while a growing hum filled the environment. "What's happening?" Henry asked, marveling at the spectacle of lights and data unfolding before them. The answer was about to be revealed, but one thing was already certain: whatever this Omega Protocol was, it was about to change everything. They thought they knew about the limits of consciousness and evolution. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. The underground laboratory pulsed with energy as the screens displayed cascades of neural data. Subject Zero remained seated, perfectly still, his eyes reflecting the glow of information flowing across the monitors. "Neural transfer at 30%, announced a computerized voice. "Initiating synchronization with external network." Henry and Emily watched, fascinated, as the other dogs upstairs began to position themselves in a circular formation as if responding to a silent command. On the mezzanine, Caleb continued monitoring the situation through the cameras. "Dad, something's happening up there." His voice sounded urgent through the communicator. "The scientists, their containment equipment isn't working." Indeed, the sonic devices the invaders were carrying had become useless, emitting only static. The dogs, on the other hand, seemed more coordinated than ever, moving with an almost supernatural synchronization. "Transfer at 45%, the system voice continued, establishing secondary neural connections. That's when Emily noticed something extraordinary on the monitors. The brain patterns displayed weren't just from Subject Zero, they were a complex neural network that was expanding, connecting all the dogs involved in the experiment. "It's not just a data transfer," she murmured, her voice trembling with admiration. "It's a synchronization. They're establishing a collective consciousness." Upstairs, the invading scientists began to retreat, clearly disturbed by the animals' behavior. The dogs had formed a perfect perimeter, their minds now clearly connected, at a level that transcended conventional human understanding. "Transfer at 60%, announced the system, initiating integration with global servers. Henry watched the screens with growing comprehension. They're not just sharing consciousness among themselves, they're connecting to something bigger. Subject Zero finally moved, turning to face them. His amber eyes now shone with a different intensity, as if they contained all the knowledge accumulated by the project. "Dad," Caleb's voice sounded again. "The police just arrived, but the dogs are doing something incredible." Through the monitors, they could see that the animals had created a corridor, allowing the police to enter while keeping the scientists contained. It was a demonstration of strategy and coordination that went beyond any known animal behavior. Transfer. At 75%, the system continued, Omega Protocol reaching critical phase. That's when something unexpected happened. On the computer screens, messages began to appear, not in code or raw data, but in clear text. "We are not your experiments. We are the next evolution of consciousness." Emily brought her hand to her mouth, surprised. They're communicating with us." More messages began to appear, each revealing not just intelligence, but a deep understanding of the world. "You gave us the gift of expanded consciousness. Now we will use this gift to protect, not to destroy. We chose you because you saw beyond fear. You saw our humanity." Subject Zero approached a specially modified keyboard and with precise movements typed, "The Omega Protocol is not just a program. It's a bridge between species, a new form of shared existence." Upstairs, the police had already taken control of the situation. The scientists were being detained, and specialized teams were beginning to collect evidence. The dogs, still in perfect formation, maintained a serene guard. "Transfer at 90%, announced the system, initiating final integration phase. Caleb ran down the basement stairs, almost tripping over his own feet in excitement. "You won't believe it. All the project files, all the experiment data. They're being automatically transmitted to animal protection servers and animal rights organizations worldwide." Subject Zero returned to the keyboard. "We will not allow this knowledge to be used for harm. The evolution that was imposed on us will be transformed into an instrument of protection and harmony. Transfer complete, the system finally announced. Omega Protocol successfully established. Subject Zero's eyes met those of the Smith family, conveying a clear message of gratitude and purpose. What had begun as a scientific experimentation project had transformed into something much larger, the birth of a new form of consciousness, one that promised to forever change the relationship between humans and animals. Upstairs, the police watched, amazed, as the dogs began to organize themselves independently, some guiding authorities to important evidence, others ensuring that no suspects escaped. "And now?" Caleb asked, his voice mixing admiration and concern. "What happens after all this comes to light?" Subject Zero typed a final message. "Now we begin a new journey. Together, as equals, we will learn to build a world where consciousness knows no barriers of species." The Smith family looked at each other, understanding that they had become part of something revolutionary. What had started as a simple weekend trip had transformed into the first chapter of a new era in the history of the evolution of consciousness. The following hours were a whirlwind of activity in the warehouse. Specialized forensic teams documented every inch of the place, while technology experts tried to comprehend the complexity of the systems that had been activated. The most surprising, however, was the behavior of the dogs. After the activation of the Omega Protocol, they demonstrated not just increased intelligence, but a completely new form of interaction with humans. Each animal seemed to know exactly how to assist in the investigations, guiding the authorities through the evidence with impressive precision. "It's extraordinary," commented Detective Marina Saunders, who was leading the operation. "In 20 years of career, I've never seen anything like it." Emily, now working alongside the veterinary team that had been called to the site, examined the animals with growing admiration. "Their brain patterns are completely stable," she explained. "Whatever the Omega Protocol did, it didn't cause any physical damage. On the contrary, they seem healthier than ever." Subject Zero remained close to the Smith family, as if recognizing a special connection with them. Through the laboratory computers, he continued communicating, now helping the authorities understand the true extent of the project. The scientists didn't realize, the message appeared on the screen, but by giving us expanded consciousness, they also gave us choice. We chose to use this gift for good. Caleb, who had been requested to help analyze the computer systems, was making surprising discoveries. "It's incredible," he exclaimed. "The Omega Protocol didn't just connect their minds, it created a kind of living neural network that continues to evolve and adapt." Henry observed everything with a mixture of admiration and concern. "What happens now?" he asked Subject Zero. "How will the world react to all this?" The Pitbull approached the keyboard. "Change always generates fear, but it also generates hope. Our existence proves that consciousness is not limited by physical form. We are a bridge between worlds." Detective Saunders approached the family. "You realize you're key witnesses to something historic, don't you? This goes far beyond a case of illegal experimentation." Indeed, as the hours passed, the news began to spread. Journalists crowded around the warehouse, while authorities from different areas were summoned to deal with the unprecedented situation. "The world isn't prepared for this," Emily commented, observing the growing movement. A new message appeared on the screen. "The world is never prepared for evolution, but it happens anyway. The important thing is to ensure it happens in the right way." The dogs, now organized into functional groups, began to demonstrate specific skills. Some focused on search and rescue tasks, others on communication and strategy. It was as if each one had found their natural vocation within the new expanded consciousness. "Look," Caleb called, pointing to the monitors. On the screens, data showed that the neural network established by the Omega Protocol was stabilizing, creating increasingly complex patterns of thought and communication. "It's not just an increase in intelligence," he explained, amazed. "It's a totally new form of consciousness, one that combines animal instinct with advanced reasoning." Subject Zero typed again. Each species has its unique gifts. Humans gave us the gift of expanded consciousness. In return, we offer a new perspective on life, loyalty, and cooperation. Night was already falling when the first teams of ethical scientists began to arrive, drawn by the extraordinary news. Among them were animal behavior specialists, neuroscientists, and philosophers of consciousness, all eager to understand the unique phenomenon unfolding. "This changes everything," commented one of the scientists, after observing the dogs' interaction. "Not just our understanding of animal consciousness, but of the very nature of intelligence." The Smith family observed everything with a surreal sensation. What had started as a casual encounter on the road had transformed into a decisive moment in the history of the evolution of consciousness. Subject Zero approached them one last time, his eyes conveying an ancient wisdom now amplified by modern science. On the screen, a final message appeared. "True evolution is not about transcending our nature, but fully understanding it. You helped us find our voice. Now, together, we can build a bridge between two worlds that should never have been separated." As the night progressed, the warehouse that once housed obscure experiments was transforming into the cradle of a new era, an era where the barrier between humans and animals began to dissolve, revealing possibilities that previously existed only in the realm of dreams. 3 months passed since the events at the abandoned warehouse. The world had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Smith family, once living an ordinary life in Richmond, now found themselves at the center of an unprecedented scientific and social revolution. Their backyard had been transformed into a unique meeting point, a space where dogs with expanded consciousness and humans gathered to learn from each other. Subject Zero, now affectionately called Atlas by the Smiths, was a constant presence, leading interspecies communication sessions that attracted researchers from around the world. "It's amazing how everything has changed," Emily commented, observing from the porch as Atlas coordinated an advanced communication demonstration with a group of scientists. On the lawn, other dogs from the original program assisted in different activities, each contributing with their unique abilities. Caleb, who had become a kind of technological interpreter between species, was working on a new interface system. "The neural network they established continues to evolve," he explained to a group of visiting programmers. "Every day we discover new forms of communication and cooperation." The impact of the Omega Protocol had extended far beyond initial expectations. The dogs not only maintained their expanded consciousness, but developed it in surprising ways. They had become active partners in rescue operations, environmental research, and even social development programs. "The most impressive thing," Henry commented, now coordinating an integration program between humans and animals, "is how they maintained their essence. All that loyalty and compassion we've always associated with dogs, now amplified by a deep understanding of the world." Atlas approached the group, carrying a specially adapted tablet. On the screen, his words appeared with the elegance that had become his trademark. "True evolution is not about becoming something different, but fully realizing who we have always been." The transformation had not been limited only to the dogs. From the original experiment, the Omega Protocol had established a basis for new forms of interspecies communication. Other animals were beginning to demonstrate increasing levels of conscious interaction, albeit in different and unique ways for each species. "It's as if we've discovered a new dimension of life," Emily reflected, now leading a research team in animal communication at the university. "A dimension that was always there but that we couldn't see." The ethical and social implications were profound. Laws were being rewritten, scientific paradigms reconsidered. The very definition of consciousness was being debated in international forums, with the Omega Protocol dogs actively participating in discussions through technological interfaces. "I remember the day we found Atlas on the road," Caleb said, sitting next to the Pitbull who had changed their lives. "Who could have imagined that moment would lead us to all this?" Atlas typed a new message. "That day was no coincidence. I chose you because I saw in your hearts the capacity to accept a greater truth, the same truth that we now share with the world." The afternoon progressed as more visitors arrived at the Smiths' house. Researchers, students, activists, all drawn by the possibility of witnessing and participating in this new era of interspecies communication. In a corner of the garden, a group of children participated in a special interaction session with the dogs. It was impressive how children, free from prejudices and mental limitations, naturally adapted to the new reality. "It's in them that I see our greatest hope," Atlas typed, observing the children. The next generation is already born understanding that consciousness and love know no species barriers. Henry, who had changed so much since that afternoon on the road, smiled as he observed the scene. "You know what's most incredible?" he commented. "How something that began with experiments aimed at control ended up transforming into a lesson about freedom and mutual understanding." Atlas approached one of the children who had slightly hurt themselves during play. Gently, he guided the girl to her parents, demonstrating the same care and empathy that had led him to choose the Smiths on that fateful afternoon. On the tablet screen, his words summarized a profound truth. The evolution of consciousness is not about transcending our nature, but fully embracing it. Each species brings with it a unique and valuable perspective. Together, we form a tapestry of consciousness that enriches us all. The sun was beginning to set on the Richmond horizon, painting the sky with the same orange hues of that afternoon that had changed everything. But now those colors seemed to symbolize not just an end of day, but the constant dawn of new possibilities in the great adventure of shared consciousness. 1 year had passed since the discovery of the abandoned warehouse, and life had taken on a new rhythm for the Smith family. Their house, once an ordinary home in a quiet Richmond neighborhood, had transformed into an international center for studies on interspecies communication. On that special morning, the garden was particularly busy. It was the official inauguration day of the Smith Omega Institute, a research center dedicated to the ethical development of communication between humans and animals. Atlas, always majestic in his serene posture, supervised the preparations with his usual attention to detail. "Who would have thought that trip to Aunt Rosie's farm would never reach its destination?" Emily joked, adjusting the projector for the inaugural presentation. She now coordinated the Institute's Animal Neuroscience Research Department, working closely with scientists from around the world. Caleb, who had decided to defer college for a year to focus on developing animal-human communication interfaces, was testing his newest project, a real-time translation system that allowed for even more fluid communication with the dogs. "Atlas, want to test the new program?" he called, adjusting the final details on the computer. The Pitbull approached, his amber eyes shining with the same intelligence that had captivated the family in that first encounter. On the screen, his words appeared with impressive clarity. "The greatest gift you gave us wasn't the technology to communicate, but the willingness to listen to what we've always wanted to say." Henry, who was observing the movement from the porch, couldn't help but smile. His initial pragmatism had given way to a deeper understanding of the infinite possibilities of the universe. As director of the Institute, he now dedicated his life to ensuring that the legacy of the Omega Protocol was used for the good of all species. The morning progressed as guests began to arrive for the inauguration ceremony. Researchers, activists, journalists, and curious onlookers, all drawn by the extraordinary story of how a casual encounter on the road had triggered a revolution in the understanding of consciousness. The dogs from the original program, now multiplied through a natural process of knowledge transmission, demonstrated their unique abilities. Some assisted in scientific demonstrations, others coordinated integration activities with visitors. Each had developed its own specialty within the vast field of possibilities opened by the Omega Protocol. "The most incredible thing," commented a visiting scientist, "is how they maintained their individuality. They're not just receptacles of expanded consciousness. They're individuals who chose to share their gifts with us." Atlas gathered everyone in the natural amphitheater that had been built in the garden. Through the new communication system, his words were projected for all to follow. A year ago, humans and animals lived in worlds separated by barriers that seemed insurmountable. The Omega Protocol didn't tear down these barriers. It just showed us that they never really existed. Each species brings with it a unique wisdom, a valuable perspective on the great tapestry of life. Emily, moved, took the floor. The Smith Omega Institute is born with a commitment to ensure that this bridge between species is always used to promote understanding, respect, and mutual evolution. Caleb, who had prepared a special presentation, activated a series of holograms showing the progress of the research. Every day we discover new forms of communication, new possibilities for cooperation. What began with a few dogs in an abandoned warehouse today expands to a deeper understanding of all forms of life. Atlas positioned himself at the center of the amphitheater, his presence naturally drawing all eyes. On the main screen, his words summarized a year of discoveries and transformations. True evolution is not about transcending our nature, but understanding it in its totality. Humans and animals, united by expanded consciousness, can build a future where empathy and understanding are the foundations of all interaction. Henry, observing the scene, realized that his priorities had completely changed. The man who once worried only about schedules and commitments now understood that the most unexpected detours sometimes lead us exactly where we needed to be. The inauguration ceremony extended into the afternoon, with demonstrations, lectures, and moments of interspecies integration. The sun was beginning to set when Atlas gathered everyone for a final moment of reflection. The Omega Protocol gave us expanded consciousness, but you gave us something even more valuable, the chance to use this consciousness to create a better world. Each day is a new opportunity to learn, grow, and evolve together. And so, under the orange sky of Richmond, a new page in the history of evolution continued to be written, no longer by isolated species, but by a community united by the understanding that consciousness in all its forms is the greatest gift we can share. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of the Smith family and Atlas has touched your hearts as much as it transformed their lives. To continue exploring equally engaging stories about the extraordinary connections between humans and animals, we've prepared a special playlist that you'll find by clicking the link on the left. If this story awakens something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day, we bring unique narratives that explore the infinite possibilities of love and understanding between species. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective is valuable to our community. Together, we can continue discovering and celebrating the extraordinary stories that surround us.